DA Larry Krasner is under a lot of heat and pressure right now. I don't know if you guys have heard about this story, but it is huge. Now, he is supposed to be more of a progressive DA, so to speak. He is one of those people that did feel that criminals do deserve a second chance. Well, now he is in the hot seat by the GOP in Philly. Let's take a look at this. This is a huge story. PA House votes 107 to 85 to impeach Philly DA Larry Krasner. Senate will hold trial. So this is freaking huge. We're going to do the article first, and then I'm going to show you the video clip. So this is Larry Krasner here. Wait till you hear why they want to impeach him. The Pennsylvania House voted 107 to 85 on Wednesday to send articles of impeachment to state Senate, alleging that Philadelphia District Attorney Larry Krasner engaged in misconduct in office and obstructed a House committee investigation. Let's go on. Senate Majority Leader Ward R. Westmoreland, who was elected interim president pro tempore on Tuesday, told reporters that the upper chamber would hold additional session days for an impeachment trial, adding that the Senate cannot ignore articles of impeachment from the House. The Senate's last scheduled session day was Tuesday. None of us can comment on the House vote because we are the judge and jury in the Senate. And that was coming from Westmoreland there, who declined for further comment. Ward did not say when the Senate could reconvene to conduct the trial. Krasner said in a statement that his impeachment was the first time the General Assembly voted to remove anyone from office because their ideas were unpopular. Now we got to get into the point where we talk about what exactly were his ideas. And if his ideas were not popular, then why did he win? People heavily supported him. Maybe his ideas were not popular with a certain group. Let's go on. Voters showed that they support his policies, including improving support for crime victims and survivors, scientific approaches to law enforcement, and investing to prevent violence before it happens. They have impeached me without presenting a single shred of evidence connecting our policies to any uptick in crime. We were never given the opportunity to defend our ideas and policies. Policies I would have been proud to explain. That Pennsylvania Republicans willfully avoided hearing the facts about my office is shameful. So they are accusing him of basically being too soft on crime. Like I said, he was one of those DAs who he's more progressive, and he did agree that, you know what, we need to give people more chances, especially those that are in jail for not harsh offenses, but those that are in there for minor fractions. He's like, yeah, let's just give them chances. Like, why are you keeping these people locked up? Now they're trying to say that his actions are responsible for the crime rate increasing in Philadelphia. So I'm going to show you those crime numbers in just a second, and we're going to make some correlations here, and I'm going to show you a video clip as well. But I want people to understand why they are trying to impeach him. Let's go on. The vote followed more than 2 hours of debate in which Democrats who opposed the measure along party lines characterized the impeachment as a misuse of the chamber's constitutional power that would set a harmful precedent for future legislatures. They suggested that the General Assembly was at fault for failing to combat the surge in crime Republicans attributed to Krasner's progressive criminal justice policies, which GOP lawmakers framed as a refusal to enforce the law of the Commonwealth. One Republican representative, Michael Peskarik of Allegheny County, voted against the impeachment. So there was one Republican who voted against it. It is sad that in a lame duck session, we are using the extraordinary power we have with such disregard. If we want to have a serious conversation, if we really want to set the precedent that the standard for being impeached is this amorphous dereliction of duty, then I would ask us to pick up a mirror and ask, do we think it's dereliction of our duty? Kenyatta said lawmakers have repeatedly ignored gun safety legislation and failed to provide money to fix mold and asbestos laden schools or address poverty as the root of crime. This piece right here, address poverty of the root of crime. This is what we're going to get into when I show you the clip, because I understand they have to address the crime rates. And I told you guys on the national level, nationally, crime is decreasing. But this is in reference to Philly. Because what I did notice, though, and every time they bring this up, they never talk about the poverty issue. And that is important to discuss, especially considering that we are in this time, 3 years of this pandemic. So you have to pay attention to the numbers and what was happening economically at that time. That is very much important here. Should you be impeached for the votes that I've seen taken on this floor that take food literally out of the mouths of the most vulnerable people in our communities, especially in cities? Now, that's coming from Kenyatta, and I agree there. Is it an impeachable defense or, impeachable offense for those types of votes, for that type of behavior? People who are voting in a way that actually harms people in poor communities and working class communities and is taking money out of their pockets. Should those politicians in Philly be impeached? Let's go on. During the floor debate, Republican lawmakers read headlines about shootings and robberies in Philadelphia and recounted anecdotes about family and constituents who live in or visit the city, framing the impeachment as a measure of relief for residents living in fear. If any of you are in the chat and you live in Philly or you have lived in Philly, please let me know. Okay, I see something from Jonathan. I lived in Philadelphia for 10 years. This isn't anything new. The majority of the PA GOP Senate don't live anywhere near Philly, but they want to control Philly because that's where they get their money. Interesting. Thank you so much for that, Jonathan. Let's go on here. New gun laws are not going to get the district attorney off his butt in Philadelphia and protect the people that elected him into office. You can put 1,000 laws there, and he is not going to do it. I'm just dumbfounded that we'd even go down that route. Now, that's coming from House Majority Leader Carrie Benninghoff. Impeachment is rarely used power granted by the state constitution to the House. It has voted to impeach 10 times, and the Senate has convicted only 3 elected officials in Pennsylvania's history. Representative Joseph Hohenstein, Democrat, Philadelphia, said, the person most recently convicted in an impeachment trial was the state Supreme Court Justice Rolf Larson, who was found to have improperly discussed cases before the court. He had previously been convicted of conspiring to illegally obtain prescription drugs. Before Larson, the last impeachment was the mid-1800s. So let's see. I want to show you, because Case Study QB was actually able to get a clip of this. I want to show you how CNN discusses this. So let's go ahead and play this clip here from Case Study QB, also discussing the impeachment of the DA in Philly.
Welcome back. Well, the Republican-led State House in Pennsylvania this week voted to impeach the Philadelphia District Attorney Larry Krasner. Republicans there accuse him of dereliction of duty, claiming his progressive policies have worsened the city's gun crisis. Well, Krasner responded saying, quote, history will harshly judge this anti-democratic authoritarian effort to erase Philly's votes by black, brown, and broke people in Philadelphia. Let's bring in our friend and CNN political commentator and host of Smirkanish right here on CNN, Michael Smirkanish.
See, they're really trying to make it so that progressives really do not stay. And this is even on the local level. So we're not even talking about Congress. This is on the local level. They're really trying to make it so that progressives and these progressive like they don't stay, right? So they impeach this guy. Now, remember, impeachment doesn't mean that you're actually removed from office. Impeachment means that there has been a process that has been started so you can have the hearing to decide whether or not to remove them from office. So when Bill Clinton was impeached, that was a hearing that was put forth for them to decide, hear what he had to say, and then to vote whether or not to remove him from office. He was not removed from office. So I just want to clarify that. Now, I want you to hear how they cover this. There's parts about this that may surprise you. So let's go on.
Well, good morning, and thanks very much for taking the time. When I think about what's going on here in Philadelphia, I think about what Robert Jackson, the former U.S. Attorney General, said back in the 40s about prosecutors. He said the prosecutor has more control over life, liberty, and reputation than any person in America, and that power is often unchecked. But this is what Larry Krasner ran on. This is what he told voters he would do, and they voted him in.
I could never vote for Larry Krasner. If I still lived in the city of Philadelphia, I think he's soft on crime, and I think that he bears some responsibility, not all responsibility, but some responsibility for the revolving door of perps who are let out and commit more crimes. Having said that, I don't see the case for impeachment.
I have to pause right there. So you'll notice even now, this is coming from Michael, and he's not progressive by any means. Okay. Michael is not progressive by any means necessary. Okay. Just want to throw that out there. Even Michael is saying he doesn't see room for impeachment. Even he is saying he doesn't agree with it. Now, I paused this here because I want you to look at these numbers, and let's screenshot this if we can. These are the homicide rates in Philadelphia, starting with 2018. In 2018, there were 294, 2019, 312, 2020, 435, 2021, 486, and 2022, 460. Now, I'm going to show you something about those numbers in just a second, because when I looked up the crime statistics for Philadelphia with those same years in mind from the Philly police site, those aren't the numbers that they have. We'll get to that point in just a second. But what I want to point out to you is this. Again, obviously, you see a big jump here in reference to the homicide rates. Again, what happened in 2020? Economically, the pandemic. So a lot of people lost their jobs. People were hurting for money financially. This is the same around the country, by the way. 2020, you're going to see an increase there, right? Going into 2021, it increases again to 486. But again, that's still going into, we're still dealing with the pandemic. That was just last year. Okay. That was just last year. And then you see a drop here in 2022, now that we're starting to come out of that phase a little bit, but it's still going to be particularly high because now you still have to deal with inflation. So again, I think it's important to point that out. There's a reason why those rates increased during that time. And I don't think it's fair to just pin this on the DA. They're not even talking about the city isn't even talking about the economic issues, what was happening at that time that may have led to that. So let's go on.
Because to your point, this is the way he ran for office. He received nearly 70% of the vote. He was then reelected again with close to 70% of the vote. There's no corruption evident. And there's this very vague standard in Pennsylvania in the state constitution. The question being, did he misbehave?
So what they have here, accuse him of not adequately enforcing state laws. That's vague. This is vague. What state laws did he not enforce? You need to be a little bit more specific there. And says his policies have contributed to the rise in gun violence. No. Economic situations have contributed to that. The pandemic, inflation, that is what has contributed to that. Poverty rates have contributed to that. So you have a lot of people. I told you the homeless issue has not been fixed. It has not decreased. Homeless rates have increased in this country the past 2 years. The poverty rate, even though they said like we passed this bill and lifted half the kids out of poverty, which I still say that's not something you should brag about because the other half of kids are still in poverty. Even though they talk about that, people are still in poverty. So economically, things have not been good the past 2.5 years. Let's go on.
What the hell does that mean? So I read the case that the Republican State House members have assembled against him. I find merit in it, but I think misbehaving and impeachment is for corruption. So I have to say, it does seem like the overturning of the will of the people. You want to get rid of Larry Krasner, then vote him out.
Well, that's the question I have reading this, right? Look,
So where is the actual corruption? So he ran on progressive policies in reference to crime, that he was going to do things differently. People voted for him. He's the one who won. That's what they wanted to happen. So how is that corrupt?
I think what you're doing is very nuanced, what you're saying, and there's little room for nuance, in our politics today, Michael Smirkanis. You don't support him, but you don't see, that they have a case. How much of this, there's a similar narrative, by the way, as you know, playing out in New York City, right?
And San Francisco.
Yeah, and in San Francisco, right on. So political? Is this purely political?
So they mentioned San Francisco because I believe San Francisco's DA also faced a similar situation here. But I do want to add, what else is happening in San Francisco? Again, they have large tent communities. They have a large homeless population. In Nancy Pelosi's district, by the way, there are a lot of people that are unhoused. San Francisco has become almost impossible for the average person to afford to live in. So all of these things play a factor with the crime. So he made a mistake there by mentioning San Francisco because I was going to tackle that one.
Well, I think it's totally political. You're making reference to the fact that Kesheev Boudin was recalled. Kesheev Boudin was too progressive for San Francisco. Holy smokes, think of that. George Gascon in Los Angeles narrowly was able to turn back what could have been an impeachment process there because of the way in which the petitions were filed. It's part of a nationwide trend. You know that George Soros supported a number of progressive district attorneys who've been supported in big cities across the country. And I'm at odds with the approach. There's this very glowing, 8-hour-long PBS special about Larry Krasner. I watched the whole thing. It was intended, I think, to make you sympathetic toward his perspective and his approach. It didn't work with me. But still, I say, elections have consequences. And when
Did you guys notice that he mentioned George Soros there? George Soros is just giving everybody money, huh? George Soros's money turns up everywhere.
Kesheev Boudin was too progressive for San Francisco. Holy smokes, think of that. George Gascon in Los Angeles narrowly was able to turn back what could have been an impeachment process there because of the way in which the petitions were filed. It's part of a nationwide trend. You know that George Soros supported a number of progressive district attorneys who've been supported in big cities across the country. And I'm at odds with the approach. There's this very glowing, 8-hour-long PBS special about Larry Krasner. I watched the whole thing. It was intended, I think, to make you sympathetic toward his perspective and his approach. It didn't work with me. But still, I say, elections have consequences. And when 70% of the city of Philadelphia votes for Larry Krasner and then reelects him by the same margin, I think it's fundamentally unfair for the state legislature to now come along from a different party, absent a showing of malfeasance, misfeasance, corruption, and say, we're going to step in and we're going to remove you. I mean, if misbehavior...
Let's add something in here. So again, he does not agree with Larry's approach, but he still doesn't think that he should be impeached. 70% of the population of Philly voted for him. 70%. That's a good amount. So again, he doesn't agree with his policies. He doesn't agree with the way he handled things, but even he still says he should not be impeached.
Elections have consequences. And when 70% of the city of Philadelphia votes for Larry Krasner and then reelects him by the same margin, I think it's fundamentally unfair for the state legislature to now come along from a different party, absent a showing of malfeasance, misfeasance, corruption, and say, we're going to step in and we're going to remove you. I mean, if misbehavior is the standard, imagine Republicans taking a look, if they had control of the Senate, at President Biden. Right? On a whim, they could decide they're going to get rid of him because they don't like his politics. Hey, he misbehaved. That's not what impeachment is about.
Okay, so that brings in the question, what is impeachment actually about? I do want to show you those crime numbers, though, because I saw different numbers when I looked up the Philly Police Department. Now, check this out. So I'm going to show you the numbers that they have here because I was like, something isn't right. Okay. Again, it's the homicide rate that they're looking at. So remember that a lot of times when they talk about the crime rate, they're not talking about petty crime. They're usually referring to the homicide rate. So both of them said that. The police department here says this, and so does the CNN clip. But the numbers aren't the same. When I look at the numbers here, on Philadelphia's police department, let me show you the top so you can see that. Philadelphia Police Department. Okay. Crime mapper. Now we're going to do the same thing they did. Homicide victims. Now let's go to year to date because that's the exact same thing that they had on theirs. And we're going to go to 2018. And I wonder if I don't know why they make the numbers so dark so you guys can't see them. I don't like that. But this is 2018 right here. 2018, 304. 2019, 316. 2020, 436. 2021, 495. And in 2022, as of November 20th, they have 464. So you see this little down arrow, down 6%. Down 6%. Why did they impeach him again? It's down. It's going down, right? So yes, like I said, there was that increase. It started to increase in 2020, which was bound to happen because of the economic situation with the pandemic, right? And that leads into 2021. Economically, still, people were still struggling. Now, 2022, we're still dealing with inflation, but things are starting to improve a little bit for people economically. So you see the crime rate is going down. So if the crime rate is now decreasing, why did they impeach him? To me, this just kind of feels like this is more political than it is about his job. But these numbers don't match. So those are the numbers on the Philly police site. Regardless, though, it's very clear to me that this just seems like it's more about politics than it is about corruption, because I still don't understand what he did, as being corrupt. He did what he ran on, and 70% of the people voted for him. Let me go to some of the comments here. Optimism of the will, backlash for anyone challenging the fascist police state. I could see that as well. Bill says the cops in Philly don't like him. Bill, the cops in Philly don't like him. The GOP in PA was just looking for any excuse to impeach. JB, as poverty goes up, crime follows at a commensurate rate. These politicians can't or won't put two and two together. Right. Because if that's the case, then basically you could say that to every DA in these cities over the past 2 years. Angela, they didn't lift anyone out of poverty. They gave some families a taste of not poverty and then took it away. Diabolical. That's true. Jonathan, if I lived in Philly, I would have voted for him again. Philadelphia has a very high poverty rate and they have limited economic opportunities, except in EDs and meds. That's why I left. Yeah. So what people don't understand, basically, it's more so a place for people in terms of economic opportunities if you have those advanced degrees. If you have that, like the Master of Education or doctorate of education. And that's why that's interesting. I've only visited Philly. I've never lived there. But that's interesting to note, Jonathan. Well said. Thank you so much. I'll take those comments on Rockfin. Yeah, that was really interesting to me. I don't know, man. I'm going to keep an eye on that story because I'm curious. I am curious. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Roger Meadows. Sab, earlier this year, I was on a Zoom call with Milk Toast Mite, put on by independentvoting.org. Him speaking as unidirectional, completely out of touch, so suburban. Believe me, I know. I live out here among these milk toasters who are comfortable. Zeldin said he'd fire Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg if elected governor. Our Krasner. What I'd like to know is, was Larry investigating the donors? If so, that explained. That's a good question. I don't know. But to me, you have to give people more information than that. Like, you can't just say, well, the crime rate went up when he was in charge. And so, yeah, because of his progressive policies, so we're going to impeach him. That's not how impeachment works. I don't know. I don't know, man.